summary over Bauer because it might not be as popular, as familiar for you in the room if you're not in the print magazine business. Just trying. Okay, so we have around 1,000 products worldwide. We're in 16 countries. In the biggest markets are Germany, UK, Australia, and the US. And that actually makes us, in terms of magazines sale of copies sold, the largest magazine publisher in Europe. We're also the largest magazine publisher in Australia, mostly through the acquisition of ACP 2 years ago. And we also bought the magazine division of EMAP in the UK. So that in total, with 1,000 products worldwide, it's 600 magazines, 400 digital products, and we also have TV stations, radio stations. It gives us a very big international footprint, and it's a family-owned company, so there's no outside stakeholders. It's all within the family. The daughter, Yvonne Bauer, just took over. She's end of 30s, and her goal is to now take the company into the next level, into the future.
And just so people can put a name to a face, as it were, what are some of the big titles in the U.S. that people will recognize?
In the US, we mostly have mass market titles in the celebrity and women's service space. So a brand you might know is In Touch Weekly, mostly celebrity news about Kim Kardashian and any other real-life celebrity you can think of. But we also had a big exclusive a few months ago about the Duggar family, if you may have heard that in the news, that originally came from In Touch. Another big one, which is actually our biggest brand in the US and also the biggest magazine in the US based on copies sold, is Women's World. Women's World sells around 1 million copies every week, which makes it the largest magazine in the US. And so one thing that's interesting with us is our business model is very different to what's the traditional magazine model in the US. The common model is you discount subscriptions heavily, and then you build a rate base and you sell advertising against this. Our model solely relies on newsstand sales, so selling the magazine at Walmart, at the grocery store, at the airports. And if you look at number of copies sold, it actually makes us the largest publisher in the US, larger than Time Inc. or Warner, and American Media and Hearst.
Yeah, that's a lot of copies. 101 million. Despite the fact that it has a huge print retail business, the digital audiences were not very big until recently. And can you explain why that was, and then why also they've recently exploded, because they have expanded manifold?
Yeah, we have to make a separation between the US and every other country. So in the US, again, our model is quite unique, that we rely solely on single copy sales of the magazines. And with this model, the reader pays for the content. So they pay $2 to $3 every week to buy the magazine. And if you look at the ad ratio, the number of ad pages in the magazines, it's the smallest in the industry. So we have every 10 pages or so, it's an ad, if not even less. So in general, we were never in the business of building a huge audience and selling advertising against it, which unfortunately in the digital world is the model that you can only apply for the kind of content we have. We can't ask someone to pay for the celebrity news or for the recipes on our women's service titles, because elsewhere you can get it for free. So it's only an advertising play. And we didn't have the sales infrastructure or the reach to make this financially successful. And as a result, the strategy for the past 2 decades was to basically not engage in digital in a serious way at all. It was just having basically landing pages to subscribe to the magazines and to put out PR for the exclusive content, but not at all in terms of a digital business. And I came over 3 years ago from the headquarters in Germany, and at the time I was the first person doing digital at the company. It was very interesting because the situation was we had all these brands, but we didn't have the sales force or the reach to actually make it a compelling offer for advertisers. And so the way we started out is we started with a small blog, and I had one editor in the beginning writing it. But our biggest benefit is we had all these brands, and there are all these third-party companies that already have all the sales force, that already have all the infrastructure, that were happy to have our brands and sell them. And as a result, we could outsource the risk of building the sales force, of having to build all these client relationships. And we pretty much grew it organically from there. We were profitable from the first month that we started doing this, and we were never losing money on a month-to-month basis, and we always reinvested the money to hire more people.
And how big is what kind of editorial team is supporting? Is it separate from the print side?
Yeah, so that's now the mission or the change we made with founding Bauer XL Media. We completely split the company from print and digital into two, because we saw that the people you need and the mechanics you need to run both businesses at its best way are completely separate. So as an example, our editorial is completely set from the print business. We have dedicated digital editors. There's some exchange on exclusive stories, but they're still being repackaged. Otherwise, the print editors-in-chiefs have no say on what happens on the website or what's being produced. Yeah.
And so, can you just go a little bit more into that, the reason for creating Bauer XL as a separate company? That you said the requirements are totally different. So could you give a little detail on that?
Yeah, sure. So we actually started out already this way, because when we built it from scratch, it was already run by a dedicated separate team, but we made it official last year in August when we launched Bauer XL Media in the US. And because of its success, the operation was internationalized in February this year. So every country that now Bauer operates in also has a separate digital division. It's called Bauer XL Media. And our goal is to launch products internationally at scale, instead of every country doing their own thing over and over again. But a reason for us doing this in terms of talent and editorial specifically, it's just the tools that you need and the mindset that you need for the people running the websites are completely different. Where on the print side, the only number you really have is the number of copies sold, but you never know why. Is it a promotion from the marketing department, or a promotion at Walmart? Is it because the cover line was great, or the cookie recipe on page 10? So no one knows, is it working for a specific reason and why? So a lot of it is based on focus groups and on gut feeling of the editors, which is very important and very necessary to do it effectively. And in our case, apparently they do it extremely well. But on the digital side, in the end, it's a numbers game. You have to understand the audience. Everything is trackable and traceable. You can see where a user is coming from, what are they reading. Sometimes you can even see why they're reading it if you build patterns over time. And the way we set it up is that our editors online are more like producers. They own the whole production cycle of a story. On the print side, you might have 5 people touching a story, from the reporter to the writer to the photo editor to the executive editor to the copy editor. Online, we have one person that sources the idea, that writes the story, that pulls the photo, that puts it on social media, and in the end tracks the analytics. And because they own the whole cycle, they can see what's working and why. And as a result of that, we actually have very high efficiency with the staff versus the traffic we're getting. I'm not sure if it's the next slide. So you can see the traffic development. We basically started out with almost no traffic in 2012. And then we had growth from around 4 million unique users a month to now around 25 million. All of this has been organic, so we never paid for any traffic. And just to put some staff numbers against it, on Life and Style, one of our magazine websites, we reach around 12 million unique users a month, and the website has 2 editors. And so those 2 editors are focused on producing the content that reaches 500,000 plus page views, and not producing 100 stories per day that might achieve 5,000. And so for us, the goal is how can we empower the editors, give them the tools, the insights, and also a very flexible production system in terms of CMS to make all of this very scalable.
Yeah, that's amazing. 2 people, 12 million. That's reach. So what role have social media and other distribution partnerships sort of played with this in terms of fueling this incredible growth?
Yeah, in general, Facebook for us has probably been the biggest reason or driver for the traffic growth we've been seeing, where traditionally it's quite difficult to build traffic and to build traffic quickly. If you're relying on organic search, it usually takes time to rank for certain keywords, and it's a longer-term process, which is also important. There are other ways that are more immediate, like getting into Google News, where then it depends on relevancy and recency of the content you're publishing, which has been a big driver for us as well. But Facebook certainly was the main driver. And the reason for that is that because we understand our readers so well and we look at the numbers all the time to see what's working, we are able to generate more engaging content than anyone in the industry. An example is J14, which is one of our teen magazines, which is focused on teen celebrity news. And when we started out in 2012, it had around 100,000 Facebook fans. Now it has 5.5 million, which actually makes it the largest teen brand on Facebook, larger than 17, Teen Vogue, anyone else. And we constantly get Facebook posts with hundreds of thousands of likes and shares and comments for a single post, because the content is so relevant and so engaging for the user. And because of this virality of the content, it exposes it to more people, and eventually the brand keeps growing.
So if you're wondering what those teenage girls are looking at when they're all walking around completely absorbed in their smartphones and oblivious to reality, chances are it's J14. There's a very good chance. And are you worried, with social, are you worried at all about being so dependent on them, or dilution of the brand, giving up control over it? Is that an issue?
Dependency is always concerning. There's not much you can do other than try to diversify. But I guess in every industry you are in, there's always some dependency. Like on the print side, one of our biggest distribution channels for the magazines is Walmart. If Walmart goes out of business tomorrow, then we have the same problem as if Facebook were to close tomorrow. And so obviously we don't want to solely rely on a single source. We are working with other channels like social, in addition to social, like Google and email partnerships, and other social channels like Kik is a new platform for teens, for example. They have more than 100 million users in the US in the teen space, and we're working very closely with them on accessing this in addition to what we're doing with Facebook.
Yeah. What proportion of the traffic is mobile?
Yeah, because we have a lot of traffic coming from Facebook, and in general, because the content that we're producing is more short form content, it's 75% from smartphones and 10% from tablets. So depending on how you see mobile, it's up to 85%.
And as I just mentioned, I mean, a lot of publishers are really struggling with mobile monetization. There's a huge audience, but the techniques for monetizing it are sort of up in the air. How is Bauer tackling that?
Yeah, for us it's interesting because we started out with basically no sales force. There was no direct sales. It was all revenue from third-party relationships. So we never had any limitations enforced by direct sales. Like there were no blacklists or any other restrictions. So we could work with pretty much any third-party company and try to work on implementing the best ad experience for the user while we have maximum CPM and payout. And similar on mobile, we work with Cargo, a mobile premium ad network. And what's great with them, as opposed to us doing it directly, is they already have all the relationships to all the agencies, and they can offer selling mobile premium audience at scale with very compelling ad products that they produce themselves. And again, we offer them the brands to sell as part of their network and can benefit from the relationships and the scale they're bringing us. And the CPMs we're getting on mobile are actually higher than what we see on desktop. At the full rate, that's close to 100%. So
yeah. That's remarkable, and I feel like that's distinct from a lot of the experience of a lot of other publishers. So is most of it, you said it's third party, most of it is programmatic then? Is that programmatic mobile a big thing for Bauer?
Yes, so programmatic in general, I mean, that's quite a new term, but in general, we have been doing this for the last 3 years plus, and we have around 95% plus of the revenue coming from third-party sources. Direct sales is 5%, and as we grow the company, it actually gets less and less relevant.
Is there and you mentioned you've streamlined the process recently, sort of in terms of dealing with these exchanges. Can you just give a little insight into that? How you optimized across multiple exchanges?
Yeah, in the beginning, when we started out 3 years ago, we mostly worked with AdSense and AdX, and over time we realized there's much more potential to be realized by adding in other partners. That created certain complexities about how do you allocate the inventory to maximize the CPM, and how do you efficiently report on all of those numbers, and make sure that you make adjustments on a timely basis. And so we ended up a year ago with a total of 40 or so display partners that we had to person manually optimize in DFP and switching the CPMs. And we dealt with a lot of passback issues and fill rate issues that actually, in the end, turned out to be a big burden from an overhead perspective. And we also, at the time, still used DFP small business. And in the end, we went and worked with Operative to switch to premium, but also they have a technology which automatically pulls all the fill rate and the CPMs from all the display partners and automatically adjusts the setup in DFP. So we we're able to streamline the setup down from 40 or so partners to now 10 that are more critical and much more driver to the business, but also from a reporting optimization standpoint, it's been automated to a bigger degree.
And you can control the CPMs better, right? You can sort of make sure that they're the same across the different exchanges.
Yeah, one challenge that we had with 40 partners was there wasn't much oversight. So sometimes the inventory is cheaper priced and available to the same advertiser than on another platform. I'm sure marketers are very savvy in finding their way around these different ways of accessing the inventory. And so we made sure that we have the same setup and the same accessing points across multiple partners, yes.
Does Bauer have a big native ad operation?
It again depends on the country. In Germany, Australia, UK, we're more similar to a Hearst in terms of the setup, advertising versus newsstand sales on the print side. So there we have a much bigger advertising sales force, and they have their own native advertising studios that works very closely with the advertiser to produce content that fits their needs. In the US, again, it's mostly working with third-party companies. And allowing them to create native advertising.
So this has all been sort of about the success, the online success of digital advertising, and advertising is undoubtedly a big role, but Bauer sees a much bigger business. Can you kind of tell us what's next?
Yeah, sure. I'm going to skip some slides. So this is actually the cargo example I was mentioning here, which kind of describes our model very well. So obviously there is the direct sold part, which for us is around 5% on the left, high CPMs, but relatively low fill rate. And then we work in this case with cargo, and you can replace this by other partners on the desktop that sell us in the premium environment at high CPMs on desktop. And then we have some remnant backfill, which again on mobile is very minimal. It's like a 98% fill rate. But in general, looking at the digital space, normally, as I said, it's around advertising. And for us, the problem as we see the future of the company is just around scale. Just to put it into comparison, Bauer Media Group, in general, the holding company that has 600 magazines and 400 digital products, generates around 2.7 billion in revenue a year. Radio is around 800 million, and digital is 100 million worldwide. So you see there's a big difference between what each channel is generating, and 100 million is already quite sizable. If you look at Huffington Post, BuzzFeed, Daily Mail, they're also around the 100 million range, but they have huge audiences. And the problem that you have with advertising models is just that it's impossible or very hard to get to a billion plus in true revenue unless you own 10 Huffington Posts or BuzzFeeds.
Or the New York Times.
Or the New York Times, yeah. But they have different models. They also have the paid subscriber, which actually helps them a lot to get to these numbers. But in general, the model, as every media company has it, is you have a portfolio of brands across a different group of verticals. And normally you monetize it through either CPM channels like direct sales or programmatically, or you have some CPC channels like the Outbrains and Tabulas or other players. And so the result is that the revenue per unique user is quite small. You can look at any player in the industry. It's never exceeding 5 cents per unique unless you're a huge niche publication that's able to charge insane CPMs. But if you look at BuzzFeed, for example, they have 200 million unique users. They have around 100 million in revenue last year. That's around 3.5 cents per unique user per month. So
not even a digital dime. It's a digital nickel.
So if now the goal is let's make a billion, then you either need to somehow increase the monetization, which just by pure direct sales would be hard to do, or they need to increase the audience tenfold, which 2 billion users is quite ambitious. So in general, we see that the revenue opportunity on the advertising side is quite small. It's nice business, but our goal is not to go from 100 billion in digital to 200, but how do we build the next digital company that generates $1 billion and more in revenue. And if we just take a step back of us being a publisher and we have all this content that we use to sell and sell ads against, and look just at the digital space and see where the true money is generated, it's mostly in transactions. So it's either the reader or the consumer paying directly for some sort of product, or someone else paying the transactional environment if a user engages in a certain way. And so interesting areas are travel, with flights and hotels that are very high margin for the company that provides the referral. Obviously, you have e-commerce for products in general, subscription, financial services, gaming, all of those are huge channels in terms of value per user. Because in addition to just CPM and CPC, which you can still run, for example, Amazon, they have their own display network on the product pages. The more valuable channels are if you get paid for helping to acquire a user, you participate on a sale, or you drive a lead. For example, if you have a car website and someone signs up for a test drive for the new Ford, then that's $50 just for bringing them that interested user. And so here the revenue per user can go from 20 cents up to $50 plus, depending on what vertical you're operating in. As an example, Expedia in the travel space, they get 25% commission on every sale they do. So if you're selling a vacation for $1,000, they get $250 out of this, which obviously is a much more attractive environment to operate in. And then the question just becomes, how do you get scale?
So this is, in part, e-commerce is one of the things that you've mentioned. Now, can you explain a little bit about the structure for how you're going to approach this? Is it directly through the brands? Do you establish separate companies? How does it work?
Yeah, in general, we understand that everyone that's in this space has the hard time getting an audience, which is why it's so expensive for them to go out and, let's say, buy traffic on Google for flight searches or get app installs. As opposed to them having to acquire the audience, we already have the audience. We have around 150 million users worldwide digitally. And they already are across all these different interest verticals. And obviously the plan is to grow these audiences, but in general we see the benefit that we can have over others as converting those users that we might already advertise to anywhere right now, maybe through an AdSense retargeting campaign. They might already see a flight ad, convert those users to co-branded sites that we own and operate, where they actually make the transaction, and then keep them there from a lifetime value model perspective. So we don't want to be the affiliate to Priceline that just gets a $5 commission once, but we want to own a travel site that we can then capture users and remarket them over time.
And so how do you steer them from the editorial to the transactional sites? Like, what are some of the tricks that you can use to find likely buyers?
The obvious one is just we write relevant editorial content and push them to these sites through the articles. But the more advanced future that we see is we're currently in the process of building our own data warehouse in a traditional direct response way, where we capture any user information that we can get across products. So it might be the easy ones, like what articles are you reading, but we're also trying to get demo information, interest information based on what you read on our sites, but also on other sites on the internet, where we can enrich your profile once we have your email hash or a cookie that we can then go to other data companies. And so once we know that you now read this article about travel on Women's World and it was about summer vacation, if you now go to InTouch, the obvious promotion would be to show you, let's say, a hair product because it's InTouch and it should be beauty, but we actually know that you're interested in travel, so we can show you a travel promotion instead of the obvious one, which eventually leads to a higher a higher conversion rate and a higher revenue per user.
Could you also like surface editorial content on InTouch that's about travel, like Justin Bieber traveling somewhere? Is that what you're talking about, or are you talking about the ad side?
More on the ad side. So we're basically in the process right now of kind of rebuilding the concept that AdSense has with Google, where they use all these different touch points that you have, like search and YouTube and Gmail, to build a profile about you. And depending on what the likelihood of conversion is on the website you're on, it might be a contextual ad that's relevant depending on the environment of the website. Like if I'm on a fishing website, I might see a fishing ad with Google, but I might also see buying shoes online because 5 minutes before I was searching for shoes, unrelated to the context of the page. And so we want to move beyond just the contextual, obvious referral methods to understanding the user across devices, across all the different brands we have, and understand what are they interested and most likely to convert on.
So for these parallel companies, is Bauer going to launch them, acquire them, a little of both?
We have 3 ways of doing this. The fastest time to market is we partner with existing players, but that's also giving up the most of the control and of the future value of the customer. As I said, we can just work with Priceline, and they already have all the relationships with the travel agencies, and they already have all of the booking systems set up. But usually it's a one-time referral, and they just keep remarketing and benefiting from the value of the user. The other, a bit faster but more expensive time to market is purchasing an established player, and then we also looking at building things ourselves. And there are different solutions in different verticals. So as I said, we have your travel and e-commerce and financial services and gaming. Just to provide a few examples, so on the flights and hotel category, we actually acquired a flight search engine, flight comparison in Germany, which is similar to Kayak. It wasn't a big brand on its own, but they had all the relationships and they had all the model and technology set up. And then we used our editorial traffic to convert users and have them use the booking system. And now we are internationalizing that technology to bring it to all the countries.
So this is where the Bauer XL's really its international footprint comes into play, right? Because you buy it in one company, but then you can farm it out, as it were, to all over the world.
Exactly. And so we have other examples, like on the financial services front, we have just acquired the largest financial service comparison in Poland, which compares health insurance, life insurance, cell phone plans. And the only thing you need to do to internationalize it is translate the content and build local relationships. But the technology and the know-how is already there, and now we can work on rolling it out to all the countries.
Cool. And I guess that's sort of, it sounds like this is the centerpiece of the plan going forward. Do you see any potential in other revenue streams? Like you mentioned, you said that like online subscriptions is not really something that Bauer can do, but like things like events, what about that?
Yeah, online subscriptions is also a possibility that, depending on the model and the content that you have, can work. For example, we invested in a Swedish startup called Lifesum, their health tracking and nutrition app, and there you can use it for free. You can every day track what you're eating and it makes recommendation what you should be eating. But there is a premium plan where you actually get more nutrition information, and you also get recipes suggested to you depending on what your goals are of losing weight or of gaining. And they actually pay for this premium plan that very sizable audience does. And so depending on what your content is, what you're offering, it can work, but it doesn't always work. Events are interesting also, again, depending on the brand and the audience. Where with J14, we now turned this print magazine brand into a much broader, bigger brand that reaches more users than ever before. Where on social media, we have an English version with 5.5 million Facebook fans. We now have a Spanish version where we translate the English teen content into Spanish for the Hispanic and Latin American markets. And we have 3.3 million Facebook fans there. So it's a huge audience, and now it actually puts us in a position where we are much better or much more able to negotiate with third parties like AEG, for example, or Live Nation to do events that include teen celebrities or TV partnerships with Nickelodeon. So it's just, there are different ways depending on the brand that you can leverage. And in the teen example, yes, there is definitely a possibility to do an event where we are hosting the concert and get ticket sales.
Cool. I see Ross lurking with the microphone, so I guess it is time for Q&A, if that is all right. If anyone has any questions.
Anybody? I could ask a question. I don't know. You may have touched on this when I stepped out for a second or not. I don't know. What do you see as your biggest challenges or threats right now to your business?
Biggest threat is definitely the dependency on channels like Facebook. Like if we would look at what happens if one partner would go away tomorrow, then it's the biggest traffic drivers and the biggest revenue partners, which would be Facebook and Cargo in our example, in the US. So depending on what market you're looking at, it's different partners at play. And as we move to these transactional models, that's also then the bigger opportunity, because there we have the direct relationship to the customer. We're not relying on building audience at third-party places like Facebook and then drive them back to our site.
Do you sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I just was curious, are you publishing the direct to Facebook? I think you were there. Sorry. And how's that going?
I'm sorry, can you just tell us who you are?
Oh, I'm Amanda from Rodeo. Hi, Christian. Are you using the Facebook direct in article program now? And if so, how is it going?
You mean the instant articles?
Yes.
No, we're not, because there are ways where traffic can be additional and revenue can be additional, like Apple News. That's usually an audience that we didn't access before. Snapchat will probably be incremental. But with Facebook, because we get so much traffic from Facebook, and we are very good at actually converting that traffic to the website, like the users we have on Facebook to the website, and monetize them there very well. As long as we don't see similar revenue metrics or similar CPMs on Facebook, for us, it's not the first priority. Eventually, if Facebook now starts to rank instant articles higher in their algorithm, it kind of forces you in the position to work with them this way. But as long as we can stay in the current way, that's the bigger opportunity for us.
Okay. So I think we need to cut it short. We'll go to the next panel. All right. And for the next one, I'll just sort of transition, if I may. I think Ross is going to be, yeah. First of all, a hand, please. Put on my other hat.